In Chapter 1, Bristol Keats wakes late on a festival morning in her struggling hometown, focused on earning enough tips to cover overdue bills. She senses an unexplainable warmth and pull in the air but ignores it. Bristol lives with her younger sisters, Harper and Kat, and carries responsibility for the household after their parents' deaths. Harper urgently brings Bristol a third mysterious letter that has arrived without a return address, sealed in red wax like the previous two. The letter claims to be from a great aunt of their father, inviting Bristol to meet at a nearby inn that afternoon to share memories of her father and offer a valuable piece of art that could help the sisters financially. Bristol knows the story is impossible because her father had no known relatives. Despite her own curiosity about her parents' hidden past, Bristol dismisses the letter as a scam, throws it away, and leaves for work, determined to protect her sisters from whatever trap the letters represent. In Chapter 2, Tigan returns from a failed mission badly injured, reporting to Eris Dukinen that two of their people are dead or missing after an ambush. He reveals they have only 3 months left to prepare for an unknown but urgent threat, time he believes is insufficient despite years of training. Eris confirms he has widened his search for rare individuals with specific abilities, though suitable candidates are scarce. Eris then discloses a critical development. He has contacted another potential candidate who ignored earlier letters but may possess what they need. He reveals she is the daughter of Kiris and Mare. Eris confirms Kiris is dead, killed in an accident, which shocks Tigan. Tigan demands the woman be brought to them immediately, but Eris insists she must choose freely for the process to work. Tigan reluctantly agrees to remain hidden while Eris proceeds, warning him to force her decision if necessary. In Chapter 3, Bristol Keats rides past the roadside memorial marking where her father, Logan Keats, was killed in a hit-and-run 5 months earlier. She reflects on the circumstances of his death and is convinced it was deliberate, despite the sheriff's report suggesting an accident. She angrily knocks stones and flowers from the memorial, rejecting the image of her father's broken body and choosing to remember him as a kind, devoted artist and parent. As she continues toward town, Bristol recalls returning home a year earlier after her sister Kat begged her to come back when their mother went missing. Soon after Bristol returned, her mother's body was found, leaving their father devastated and unable to recover before his own death. Now Bristol stays to support her sisters, working to keep the household afloat, keeping her ambitions small and focused on survival. After she leaves, the memorial mysteriously rebuilds itself behind her. In Chapter 4, Eris Dukinen prepares the abandoned Willoughby Inn as the meeting place for the potential recruit. With the help of Esme, Olivia, Frida, and Ivy, the inn is magically restored and filled with calming influences meant to encourage trust. Eris remains uneasy, knowing this meeting is critical. Melazin, Tigan's sister, is present to ensure Tigan does not interfere, confirming Tigan is monitoring the situation but will stay away. Eris reflects on the urgency of their need and the shrinking number of viable candidates. He arranges several pieces of rare, priceless artwork, relying on the woman's extensive knowledge of art history to draw her in. Eris believes her background and family lineage make her uniquely important. The plan depends on her freely accepting the gift, which would bind her cooperation. Aware this is his final chance, Eris leaves to retrieve her, determined to force a decision if necessary. In Chapter 5, Bristol Keats reflects on Bowskeep as she bikes through town on a busy festival day, appreciating its slow growth and sense of becoming. She recalls how the town's Managerium Street Fair brought her family there, and how she now supports her sisters by working deliveries and managing shifts at Sal's Pizza Parlor, where her reliability and calm authority have earned trust. Bristol thinks about the mysterious letter again and briefly considers whether her father might have lied about having no relatives, especially given the rare artwork he once acquired. Her thoughts return to her parents' lifelong pattern of secrecy and constant flight from place to place, driven by fear and watchfulness. She remembers the moment her family almost settled in Bowskeep after her father sold a valuable sketch and bought a house, and how she left shortly after, unable to trust permanence. She wonders if her departure marked the beginning of her family's unraveling. In Chapter 6, Tigan is treated for serious injuries sustained during the failed mission, as Madame Chastain removes 7 poisonous claws embedded in his back. 2 members of his squad, Nisa and Liam, were lost, and their bodies could not be recovered. The officers discuss their worsening situation and the lack of a crucial, rare ability they urgently need despite ongoing training and recruitment efforts. Tygan confirms that Eris Dukinen is meeting a new potential candidate, though the others doubt it will succeed, given past failures and the limited time remaining. The group criticizes Eris's cautious, law-bound approach, arguing they cannot afford delays. After the officers leave, Tygan remains behind, determined this attempt will not fail. He reflects that the candidate is the daughter of Kiris and Mare, and resolves that if she cannot be persuaded to help willingly, he will ensure she is made useful by force if necessary. In Chapter 7, Bristol Keats continues making deliveries during the Menagerium Festival when she learns Sal's pizza shop has lost power due to an unexplained surge, forcing it to close and costing her a day's wages and tips she desperately needs for bills. Determined not to go home empty-handed, Bristol recalls the mysterious letter offering rare art. She rides to a local gallery and speaks with Sonia, the owner, who represents her late father's work. Bristol asks what Sonia would pay immediately for an extremely rare piece of art. When Bristol insists she may receive such a piece as a gift, Sonia warns her about forgeries and stolen art, but agrees to advance $1,000 in cash if the artwork appears authentic, with the understanding it will be verified and the money reclaimed if it proves false. Bristol commits to returning within the hour, choosing to pursue the meeting connected to the letter. In Chapter 8, Tygan examines the rare sketches laid out for the meeting and questions the decision to use art from Jasmine's personal conservatory collection as bait. He distrusts Jasmine because of her past connection to Kiris and unresolved accusations between them, and he doubts whether the woman they are courting is worth such a sacrifice. Tygan notes that other incentives were already offered and ignored, making the reliance on art feel desperate. As he waits, Ivy alerts him that Eris has returned. Although Tygan promised to stay out of the encounter, he positions himself nearby, unwilling to fully disengage. Growing impatient and hostile, he begins to seriously consider abandoning subtlety altogether and forcibly taking the woman if persuasion fails. In Chapter 9, Bristol Keats goes early to the Willoughby Inn to confront the people behind the letters and secure the promised art. She finds the inn restored and is welcomed by Ivy, then meets Eris Dukinen, who confirms the sketches are original Leonardo da Vinci works and urges her to choose one as a gift. While waiting, Bristol senses she is being watched and becomes increasingly uneasy. She overhears voices in the dining room and discovers Eris, Ivy, Sheriff Orley, and others are not human, but monstrous beings. Tygan confronts her and insists accepting the art places her in service to a king. Bristol refuses servitude, but Eris explains they want her to perform a task. Use her instincts to find a door for them. Bristol rejects the offer, takes a dragon sketch, and flees, as the inn violently tries to stop her. She escapes on her bike. Watching her leave, Eris and Tygan conclude she has potential and believe she will return. In Chapter 10, Bristol Keats flees the inn in shock, clutching the stolen sketch and questioning the reality of what she witnessed. As she nears home, she stops at her father's roadside memorial and encounters Willow, who appears to have been waiting for her. Willow reveals she saw Bristol's father with Trows shortly before he disappeared and implies these creatures are dangerous and deceptive. When Bristol insists her father is dead, Willow questions whether she ever saw the body and references the sheriff, hinting she knows his true, monstrous nature. Willow then vanishes inexplicably, leaving Bristol shaken and terrified. Before disappearing completely, Willow whispers that the Trows took her father. This encounter confirms for Bristol that the creatures she saw at the inn are real, and that her father's death may not have been an accident, deepening the mystery surrounding his disappearance and tying it directly to the supernatural forces now pursuing her. In Chapter 11, Harper and Kat are at home when Kat returns early from work in distress. Kat reveals she has been fired from her job without notice after money went missing from the safe. She insists she did not steal anything and explains she was the only employee on duty who knew the safe combination. The situation worsens when Kat reports the security cameras were unusable because a power surge had fried them. Furious and humiliated, Kat tears off her work uniform and vows to immediately search for a new job, asking Harper to destroy the uniform. This incident creates an immediate financial crisis for the sisters and introduces a second unexplained power surge, mirroring the one that shut down Sal's pizza shop earlier that day. In Chapter 12, Bristol returns home and tells Harper about the creatures at the inn and Willow's claim that Trows took their father. Harper reveals she has heard of Trows and identifies them as Fae, confirming this through a book she read. Harper explains Fae rules, including that accepting a gift places a person in unbreakable debt, which makes Bristol realize why the art mattered. Believing her father may still be alive, Bristol decides she must return to the inn to get answers. Despite Harper urging her to run, Bristol refuses to keep fleeing like their parents did. She plans to negotiate with the Fae for information about her father. Harper helps her prepare, warning her about Fae dangers and protections, including iron and refusing Fae food. Bristol leaves instructions to sell the art if she does not return and promises to come back, determined to confront the Fae and end the uncertainty surrounding her family. In Chapter 13, Bristol returns to the Willoughby Inn and finds it reverted to a ruined, abandoned state, believing she is too late. Inside, she discovers Tigan waiting alone and confronts him. Tigan insists that by taking the art, Bristol has already entered an obligation, though she argues the choice was never finalized. He confirms Eris will not return and that the deal now lies with him. Bristol presses for answers, learning that the task involves finding a door in their world and that she would be rewarded with the art regardless of success. Tigan admits he is Fae, part of the Tuatha Dé of the Danu Nation, and explains that her father was mortal-born, but raised in their world by guardians including Jasmine. He confirms Trows exist, are dangerous, and may take people if they want something from them. Bristol finally demands a condition. If she helps them, they must help her find her father, who may still be alive. In Chapter 14, Tigan internally recognizes that Eris used the possibility of Bristol's father being alive to draw her back, a tactic that worked because her choice could not be forced. Tigan senses no active magic in Bristol and doubts whether her Fae blood, if any, will be useful, as they need more than minor instincts. When Bristol presses him to promise help finding her father, Tigan hesitates, uncertain whether he can promise to find a man who may already be dead. He questions Bristol about her father to judge whether he is worth the risk. Bristol describes Logan Keats as a mostly honest, good man who worked as an artist and moved often. Tigan reacts bitterly, knowing Logan's true identity and past in Elfame contradict that description. Bristol confirms her mother is dead, which unsettles Tigan further. Overwhelmed by the memories and conflicts stirred by Kiris and Mare, Tigan abruptly ends the discussion and tells Bristol it is time to leave. In Chapter 15, Bristol stops Tigan from leaving and demands an answer about her father. Tigan agrees to help her search for him but refuses to promise more, and Bristol accepts the terms. With the deal made, Tigan prepares for departure, revealing he is armed and accustomed to violence in his world. Bristol realizes she is truly leaving for Elfame and tries to mask her fear with humor, which irritates Tigan and leads to a tense exchange. Despite their hostility, Bristol attempts to reset their relationship, introducing herself, but Tigan keeps their dynamic formal and distant. He gives Bristol a coin, warning her it is her only way back to the mortal world. Moments later, Tigan vanishes, and Bristol is immediately surrounded by armed Fae and creatures. Without further explanation or opportunity to retreat, she is taken from the inn, marking her irreversible entry into the Fae world and the beginning of her obligation. In Chapter 16, Bristol arrives in Elfame and is overwhelmed by its immense, endless landscape of kingdoms, cities, forests, and wildlands. She realizes her father could be anywhere in this vast world. She travels under guard with Danu knights on powerful steeds, having already endured a brutal journey that carried them through portals, air, and land at extreme speed. Passing through the portal caused Bristol intense pain and made her faint, something that does not normally happen, prompting the group to continue more cautiously by land. The knights explain they must now cross the wilds, a dangerous region filled with hostile creatures. Costa gives Bristol a cloak to conceal her and warns that their magic may not protect her from everything. As the knights ready their weapons, Bristol understands the true danger ahead, but commits to continuing the journey, determined to find her father despite the risks. In Chapter 17, a powerful monster opens a door atop a distant cliff in Elfame, releasing a swarm of winged creatures and their riders into the sky. The act fills the monster with intoxicating power and a sense of invincibility as the creatures respond to her command. As the swarm gathers momentum, a buried memory briefly surfaces, a promise made long ago that tugs at the monster's conscience. For a moment, the monster hesitates, aware of the quiet pull of that promise. However, the surge of power and the frenzy of the unleashed riders overwhelm the hesitation. The monster chooses the rush of control and dominance over the lingering memory, allowing the promise to be suppressed. With the creatures fully released and the sky alive with their movement, the monster embraces her power, signaling the beginning of a looming threat that will spread across Elfhame. In Chapter 18, Teigen returns to the palace in Elfham as dusk falls and seeks out his sister Melusine. He confirms that Bristol has survived the journey through the wilds, though she fainted during portal travel, an unusual reaction. Melusine mocks Bristol's appearance and usefulness, while Teigen insists Bristol is necessary despite limited time before the choosing ceremony. They discuss mounting political pressure following the Queen's death, fears that King Cormac may gain control of the Cauldron of Plenty, and the weakness of current recruits. Teigen asks Melusine to take Bristol into her training ranks, but she refuses, calling Bristol trouble and teasing Teigen about his motives. Their argument exposes lingering resentment over past failures involving Kiris. Melusine deflects responsibility, asserting that trust always involves risk, and leaves Teigen burdened by the looming crisis and his decision to bring Bristol into Elfhame. In Chapter 19, Bristol enters the city of Elfhame with the Danu Knights and struggles to accept the reality of the Fey world. Casta uses magic to grant Bristol the ability to understand all Fey languages. As they cross Lug Bridge, Bristol observes the diversity of Fey and realizes her father would not stand out here. The Knights explain that Fey can smell her mortal origin. Bristol questions a street mother, who confirms there are no trows nearby, but suggests mountain trows may be found near Mugwort Street in the East Quarter. The woman agrees to ask around about Logan Keats. Bristol insists on searching for her father immediately, stating Teigen promised to help her. The Knights react uneasily and explain it is Teigen's responsibility to guide her. When Bristol asks where to find him, Quinn points out the royal palace. Bristol learns Teigen is king of the Danu nation, revealing the true power of the man she bargained with. In Chapter 20, Bristol arrives at the Danu Palace amid nightly revels, but refuses to join the festivities, choosing to remain in her room. Teigen learns she brought her own food and is already acting independently. Casta reveals Bristol has begun searching for her father by persuading May, a street contact, to ask around about Logan Keats. The Knights debate Bristol's lack of visible magic, but acknowledge she managed to secure both rare art and Teigen's promise, suggesting unusual influence. Teigen admits Eris told Bristol her father might be alive to bring her to Elfhame by choice, despite objections. Concern grows over what will happen if Bristol learns the truth about her father and over keeping her parentage secret. Teigen orders his officers to manage the situation and prevent rumors from spreading back to Bowskeep. As he leaves to confront Bristol, it is clear she is already disrupting plans and stirring unresolved tensions tied to Kiris and Mare. In Chapter 21, Bristol stays alone in her lavish palace room, avoiding Fey food and relying on the rules she learned from Anastasia Wiggins' book. She reflects on her parents, their secrets, and her mother's departure, reaffirming her resolve to stop running and take control. Teigen comes to her room and insists she attend the palace festivities as part of her role, but Bristol refuses, wary of the obligations tied to Fey customs and food. Their tense exchange confirms Teigen had been watching her at the inn, though he claims to respect boundaries in the palace. He warns her that isolating herself will cost her valuable allies, and that friends are essential in Elfhame. After he leaves, Bristol realizes he is right and decides she must engage with others to gather information about her father. When she opens the door again, Teigen is waiting and clarifies that only pixie food is dangerous. Accepting the necessity, Bristol prepares to attend the festivities. In Chapter 22, Teigen escorts Bristol to the palace festivities after she demands the second piece of art be delivered to her sisters as security if anything happens to her. He refuses immediate delivery but agrees to consider it. Bristol presses him about visiting the city to search for Trows and her father. Teigen delays, citing her orientation and other duties, but agrees to take her in a few days. He confirms Jasmine raised her father and explains that Logan Keats arrived in Elfhame as a child, likely taken by Fey, and that his mortal family later died. At the festivities, Teigen covertly watches Bristol eat safely, assigns Cully to protect her, and observes her charm and adaptability despite sensing no magic in her. He secretly heals her injured lip. Teigen later confronts Eris and learns Eris did not tell Bristol her father might be alive, revealing uncertainty about who informed her and raising concern that Trows may truly be involved. In Chapter 23, Logan Keats, revealed as the Butcher of Kelwyth, hides in the wilds of Elfame, sheltering in a trow cave and warming himself by a small fire. He reflects on his past mistakes, recognizing that he should have listened to Mare when she urged him to leave before complacency set in. Disoriented by Elfame's distorted sense of time, Logan realizes he may have been gone far longer than he intended, though he trusts his daughters will survive without him. He reminds himself of the old rules that once kept him alive. Regret and hesitation are deadly, and survival depends on constant movement. Logan acknowledges that running has always been his fate after failing his divine mission and choosing love over obedience. As he prepares to rest, he knows the trials will return soon, and he resolves once again to keep running if he wants to stay alive. In Chapter 24, Bristol attends orientation at Cerridwen University with 5 other mortal recruits. Madame Chastain, High Witch of the Danu Nation, explains they were summoned because Elfame is under attack. A powerful monster has opened a hidden portal, and only mortals with a rare, nearly extinct ability can locate and close it. The talent once belonged to those blood-marked by the goddess Brigid, who could navigate between worlds, but the gift faded generations ago. The open portal leads to an inexhaustible army of restless dead demons. King Cormac is secretly using this army to force kingdoms into submission before the upcoming choosing ceremony, where the Stone of Destiny will select a ruler for all Elfame. 8 kingdoms have already yielded. Danu resists, but Cormac has captured King Cale, Taigon's brother, threatening execution if Danu defies him. Bristol realizes closing the portal is critical to stopping the war. In Chapter 25, Taigon interrogates the sheriff in Lear Rotunda about Willow. The sheriff identifies Willow as a banshee and insists Logan Keats died in a roadside accident, but under questioning he recalls inconsistencies. Unfamiliar morgue workers, a missing autopsy report, and details suggesting glamour. He admits the body may not have been real. Taigon concludes the scene was a trow ambush using a faked corpse. Taigon declares Logan Keats, also known as Kyrus, is alive somewhere in Elfame. The group realizes Kyrus' knowledge of the wilds and alliance with trows make him difficult to track. Taigon reaffirms his promise to help Bristol find her father, but not what he will do afterward. He orders trow dens located and attacked, starting with Mugwort Street. Taigon believes Kyrus returned because Bristol is back and the Abyss Door has reopened. Eris warns Taigon against letting vengeance rule him, but Taigon insists time and war leave him no alternative. In Chapter 26, Madame Chastain explains that closing the Abyss Door will be dangerous, but that the recruits will be trained and protected. She evaluates their existing abilities. Julia reveals powerful shapeshifting, becoming both a cat and a lioness. Rose demonstrates hawk shapeshifting. Hollis admits she can become a mouse. Sashka shows enhanced speed and agility, and Avery displays glamour and limited elemental magic. Bristol shows no abilities. Madame Chastain outlines 5 types of magic and focuses training on innate and learned magic, explaining elemental kinships and other fey talents. She confirms all recruits possess fey blood and may be blood-marked, though the ability has long lain dormant. Bristol realizes Madame Chastain believes she is fey, which is a mistake. Afraid that correcting it could cost her the art payment or her chance to find her father, Bristol decides to stay silent and pretend she belongs, planning to continue the deception until she locates Logan Keats. In Chapter 27, Taigon prepares to ride with his knights after learning that Kyrus, Bristol's father, is alive and somewhere in Elfame. The revelation forces Taigon to confront the past and the failed plan that changed everything. Years earlier, overwhelmed by battlefield losses and pressure from King Cale, Taigon and Kyrus devised a desperate strategy to stop the Darkland monster. Rumors claimed the monster favored mortal lovers, so Kyrus volunteered to act as bait. As a mortal raised among the Danu, Kyrus was exceptionally skilled, charismatic, and empowered by gifts and blessings from Fae across the court, making him a tempting target. The plan was for Kyrus to lure the monster to a secret location where the knights would kill her. Though conceived while drunk and reckless, it initially seemed viable. Instead, Kyrus betrayed the plan to save Mare, proving to Taigon that trust can fail and alliances can fracture with devastating consequences. In Chapter 28, Bristol continues pretending to belong among the recruits, carefully copying others' reactions to avoid drawing attention. New instructors take over, easing her exposure to Madame Chastain. Olivia and Esme introduce themselves as senior council members and physicians skilled in incantations and potions. Master Reuben, Danu's master alchemist, joins them and announces strict rules. No protective amulets until recruits prove they can protect themselves. The lesson shifts to basic levitation magic, described as simple enough for mortals to learn. Each recruit is given an apple to practice the spell. While others succeed or show progress, Bristol cannot move her apple despite repeated attempts in multiple languages and methods. Esme gently suggests Bristol is having an off day, which Bristol accepts to maintain her cover. When dismissed, Bristol eats the apple, realizing she has no magical ability at all and remains fully mortal, reinforcing the risk of her deception. In Chapter 29, recruits begin field training with a shifting hedge maze designed to test survival skills under pressure. Recruits are eliminated quickly, increasing Bristol's urgency as numbers dwindle. Others fail repeatedly despite magical abilities. Bristol realizes the maze changes to prevent memorization. When her turn begins, she is immediately taken down by Costa and fails her first attempt. On later attempts, obstacles escalate, including weapon-wielding officers, illusions that obscure direction, and a living sandpit that nearly traps her. During a fourth forced round, Bristol adapts by seizing a pole as a weapon and fights through the maze. She confronts Tygan directly using her father's stick-fighting techniques. Despite determination and creativity, Tygan defeats her and declares her dead again. He notes her father trained her but insufficiently. Despite her failures, Tygan orders Olivia to treat her injuries and commits to taking Bristol into the city at dusk to search for the Trows, advancing her father's investigation. In Chapter 30, Bristol wanders the palace after hearing what sounds like her sister Cat singing. Unseen, a golden serpent spy slips free from a mirror and silently follows her, observing her movements to report later. Bristol traces the song through an ornate suite of rooms filled with distinctive Danu art and furnishings. She reaches an upper study that appears abandoned and disturbed, filled with scattered books, shattered frames, and hundreds of tally marks carved or smeared onto the wall, suggesting long-term obsession or imprisonment. As the singing resumes, Bristol searches desperately for its source. She senses a breeze and the smell of fresh laundry, then discovers a hidden opening in the stone wall. Touching it reveals a small, unstable portal. Through it, Bristol sees Angus standing on a washing machine in her family's mudroom. She realizes the sound she followed was her sister's doing laundry, and that she has accidentally found a portal connecting Elfame to her home. In Chapter 31, Bristol confirms the opening she found is a working portal connecting Elfame to her family's mudroom. Harper and Kat see and speak with her through it, initially terrified. Bristol explains her bargain with the Fae, the art being sold to support her sisters, and that she is about to investigate Trows, who may have taken their father. Harper confirms the art sales are already providing money and retrieves Anastasia Wiggins's book, tearing out its pages so they can pass through the small portal. Kat demands Bristol come home, revealing that one of their father's paintings has sold for enough money that they no longer need the deal. Bristol refuses, insisting she must find their father if he is alive and stop the danger that forced their family to keep running. After an emotional exchange, Kat and Harper reluctantly accept Bristol's choice. Bristol promises to return within a month, takes the book pages, and the portal seals, leaving her alone in Elfame just as she hears a door slam nearby. In Chapter 32, Bristol tries to sneak out of Tegan's chambers after discovering the hidden portal, but is caught when Tygan returns from bathing. She lies about being lost carrying shoes and the torn book pages, but Tygan clearly suspects her and toys with her explanations. Bristol shifts tactics by expressing sympathy for Tygan's imprisoned brother, Cale, confronting Tygan about his constant anger and promising to do whatever she can to help him get Cale back. This unsettles him, briefly softening his stance, though he frames her offer as another attempt to extract art. He tells her to wait outside while he dresses. After she leaves, Tygan questions Deities, the enchanted snake guarding his rooms, who reports Bristol wandered into the study and spoke to unseen air, begging for books. Tygan orders the snake not to harm her. Alone, Tygan confronts the wrecked state of his study and realizes Bristol saw evidence of his unraveling, acknowledging she was right about his anger, and that her promise carried no hidden bargain. In Chapter 33, Danu knights sweep the city at dawn, questioning and eliminating Trows after Tygan's orders. May profits from cooperating with the knights, but offers no real help. A Trow who had been asking about Bristol is executed by a disguised knight, confirming the hunt is ruthless and effective. By midday, all known city trows are gone or dead, and rumors spread into the wilds that the butcher of Telwyth and his offspring are being hunted. That evening, Teigen takes Bristol by carriage to Mugwort Street to honor his promise. They find the trow nest abandoned and receive no information from shopkeepers or May, who bluntly denies knowing anything about Logan Keats. Bristol is visibly shaken but controlled. On the silent ride back, she confronts Teigen, insisting he not judge her father as weak or incompetent. Teigen acknowledges her father would be a worthy opponent, confirming grudging respect. In Chapter 34, Cully escorts Bristol back to her room through the palace grounds, fulfilling Teigen's order to ensure her safety. As they walk, Cully observes Bristol's resemblance to both her parents, noting traits of Cyrus, but also her visible worry, unlike her father's former confidence. He privately questions whether Teigen and Eris expect abilities from Bristol she may not possess, given how few recruits remain. While guiding her along Judge's Walk, a hidden palace corridor, a marble column animates into a dragon-like creature, startling Bristol. Cully explains the columns imprisoned the worst criminals of Elfhame, sentenced to centuries of living stone confinement rather than death. The creature, Pengery, was a shape-shifting Avidra who murdered Queen Brionna and her heirs. After reaching her room, Bristol reflects on Teigen's scar, realizes he survived an assassination attempt, and decides she must actively build alliances. She chooses an elegant gown, resolves to adapt, and recommits to finding her father. In Chapter 35, Kira stays hidden in the mountain palace of King Muthius, ruler of the Trows, securing wine, weapons, supplies, and safe passage through trow tunnels in exchange for past favors and protection he once gave them. His alliance with the Trows is essential to saving Mare and avoiding detection. He learns that Trows in the city are being hunted and interrogated, and that a woman named Bristol Keats is openly searching for Logan Keats. Cyrus realizes this is his daughter, who somehow came to Elfhame of her own will. He deduces Teigen is behind the hunt and now knows Cyrus is alive and present. Enraged and terrified for Bristol's safety, Cyrus understands she is under Teigen's control and constant guard. With Trows barred from the city, direct contact is impossible. Cyrus orders King Muthius' people to find a way to secretly deliver a message to Bristol, determined to reach her before Teigen does. In Chapter 36, Bristol wanders the palace grounds alone to process her growing understanding of Elfhame, realizing the training is meant to bind recruits to the survival and history of this world. She reflects on how her father's habits, art, dances, and teachings were shaped by Elfhame, confirming his deep connection to the Fey world. In the sacred groves, Teigen finds her and gives her an amulet to protect her from being trapped by Fey dancing. They speak more openly, easing tension between them. Teigen apologizes for past remarks and admits he never thought her foolish for coming to Elfhame. He reveals he has been king for 6 months and explains his permanent scar was caused by demon steel wielded by a traitorous knight who was once his closest friend. That betrayal explains his constant anger. Later, Bristol dances alone beneath the hazel trees and experiences powerful unseen magic that feels intimately connected to Teigen. The phenomenon repeats on following nights, leaving Bristol changed and increasingly bound to Elfhame. In Chapter 37, Bristol is blocked on the path to Ceridwen Hall by a creature demanding a toll and growing more threatening when she hesitates. Teigen intervenes and reveals the creature is actually Deke, a sprite using glamour to appear as a troll. At Teigen's command, Deke shrinks to his true form and flees, laughing with other sprites. Teigen explains the sprites are harmless troublemakers and that Bristol should have learned about them in her lessons. He tells her the proper toll is a sweet or fine fabric, which earns their loyalty. That night, Bristol leaves a cookie and a strip of ribbon on her windowsill. By morning, they are gone, replaced with a single pink rose petal, confirming the sprite's friendship. Bristol reflects that some beings in Elfhame are easily appeased, unlike others, particularly Teigen, whose daytime authority contrasts with his mysterious nighttime presence. In Chapter 38, Bristol prepares to travel with Teigen in daylight to search remote hamlets for information about her father. Teigen chooses inconspicuous horses and brings Cully along to avoid gossip and scrutiny. They ride outside the city, questioning farmers and innkeepers and directing anyone with information to May, paying heavily for cooperation. Bristol emphasizes that her father traveled with Trows, which unsettles locals. During the ride, Bristol asks about killing Trows, revealing her anger and belief that they hunted her father. Teigen cautions her, but ultimately reassures her that her father is alive. At a coastal hamlet, Teigen and Bristol stop to eat while Cully steps away. Tension rises as Bristol confronts Teigen about his emotional distance and perceived rejection, accusing him of treating her differently in daylight. Teigen explains he avoided public closeness to protect her from political scrutiny and noble gossip. He apologizes and helps her mount her horse himself, acknowledging the risks of his position and the growing danger of his feelings for her. In Chapter 39, Teigen expands the search for Bristol's father by sending night squads beyond Danu's borders and into other kingdoms, spreading the name Logan Keats with promises of reward. Encouraged, Bristol commits fully to her training, especially weapons work, determined to become more dangerous after learning how lethal Trows can be. By day, her relationship with Teigen remains formal, defined by rank, but by night they continue their private conversations, which gradually grow more natural and personal. Bristol wonders whether these meetings mean anything beyond obligation. One evening, Teigen finds her placing stones in the ground in her sister Kat's initials, and she explains Kat's habit of leaving fragile markers behind as a way of imagining permanence. The moment deepens Bristol's homesickness and reflection on her family. She shares personal quirks, including her fascination with spiders and respect for deliberate killing. Teigen's reaction turns distant and grim, and soon after he leaves abruptly and does not appear again for 2 days. In Chapter 40, Teigen leads a small scouting party with Melazan, Quinn, and Dalagorn into Bleakwood Forest to investigate growing threats near Femoria. They confirm no new information about Willow and fail to secure a meeting with Princess Georgina, whose attendance at the upcoming Beltane Eve may be critical. Tensions surface between Teigen and Melazan regarding leadership, Demon Steel's lingering effects on Teigen's mind, and Kael's betrayal and capture. They reach Skyborn Palace in Mistraven, gaining a strategic vantage over Femoria, and order King Merowyn to maintain constant surveillance along Baylor Pass. The party debates possible routes into Femoria and instead follows reports of dark clouds and restless dead along the southern border. They discover the aftermath of a recent massacre where restless dead scavenged bodies to build themselves, missing the creatures by minutes. Realizing how close they came to an ambush, Teigen returns to Danu determined to intensify training, knowing the recruits, especially Bristol, are dangerously unprepared for what's coming. In Chapter 41, Teigen drives the recruits through brutal training, pushing them past exhaustion. When Bristol challenges him publicly, he orders extra maze rounds and nearly assigns them to Avery until Bristol bargains to take additional punishment herself. That night in the Grove, Teigen explains his severity. On the battlefield, orders cannot be questioned because hesitation gets people killed and time is running out. Bristol accepts the logic, if not the method, and redirects the conversation. She explains what a laundromat is, revealing memories of a nomadic childhood spent constantly moving, valuing places that offered renewal without attachment. She admits she learned never to stay anywhere or grow roots, treating towns like temporary exhibits. When Teigen asks why her family kept running, she confirms it was because of the Trows. Being hunted meant the entire family paid the price. The exchange deepens their understanding of each other, linking Teigen's ruthlessness and Bristol's restlessness to survival rather than choice. In Chapter 42, Bristol learns during Esme's lesson that time moves unpredictably between the mortal and Fey worlds. Only on Samhain and Beltane do both worlds align, and mortals require a time mark to return safely without losing time or their original lives. Esme explains that time marks are small gold relics given to those with possible mortal blood. Bristol panics when she realizes she never consciously received one and fears being trapped in Elfame forever, cut off from her sisters. She runs to her room and frantically searches her belongings until she finds the gold coin Teigen had briefly warned her not to lose. Relieved, she hides the time mark inside her sneaker for safety. When the other recruits arrive, she admits her fear stems from possibly being mortal. Their reassurance offers little comfort as Bristol knows the truth. Unlike them, her family's blood is entirely mortal, and losing the time mark would mean losing everything she came from. In Chapter 43, Bristol checks the hidden portal in Teigen's study but finds her sisters absent. She leaves them a note reassuring them she is still searching for their father. With Teigen away on kingdom business, Cully escorts her to Mugruth Bridge to investigate a merchant's report of a tall, haggard mortal seen near the Bollybogs, a detail Bristol clings to as possible evidence her father is alive. While crossing the crowded bridge, Bristol is deliberately cornered in an alley by Mick, a man from her past. He confirms he knows she is searching for her father and insists Logan Keats is dead, warning her to leave Elfame. Mick reveals himself as Faye and makes a threatening, coercive advance. Bristol resists and draws a knife. Before the confrontation escalates, Cully approaches, and Mick vanishes instantly, confirming he used illusion. Bristol hides the encounter from Cully, recognizing Mick as a dangerous, unseelie presence. In Chapter 44, Tygan dismisses the tailors preparing him for Beltane Eve and debates whether to visit Bristol, finally admitting to himself that his interest in her is personal rather than duty. He learns from Avery that Bristol's 22nd birthday passed unnoticed after her arrival in Elfame. Following a Danu tradition, Tygan gives Bristol a moonstone in the sacred grove as a belated birthday gift, explaining it will strengthen her intuition. They share a rare, relaxed conversation about family. Bristol speaks of missing her sisters and her guarded view of happiness. Tygan opens up about his own family history, revealing his mother's 4 marriages, the mysterious deaths of her husbands, her disappearance, and the resulting ascension of his brother Cale as king. He explains that he was trained as knight commander while Cale ruled until his capture 6 months earlier. Despite criticizing Cale's flaws, Tygan affirms his brother is worth saving, deepening the bond and trust between them. In Chapter 45, Bristol continues her nightly visits to the sacred grove, where she dances alone yet feels an unseen presence moving with her. The grove itself senses familiarity in her, recalling a boy from the past who once loved beneath its branches, and it recognizes the same longing now mirrored between Bristol and the unseen godlike figure who joins her dance. As Bristol dances, she experiences an intense, wordless connection with the invisible partner she believes to be Tygan, feeling his presence without physical contact. The moment is charged with desire, restraint, and mutual awareness of danger and exposure. Neither Bristol nor the unseen figure realizes that another presence is watching nearby, cold and predatory rather than hopeful. Despite the grove's subtle warning, the dance continues. Bristol consciously chooses restraint, understanding the risks of fully surrendering to the magic and connection, and continues the dance cautiously, allowing the bond to deepen slowly rather than crossing a dangerous threshold. In Chapter 46, a council review meeting evaluates the recruits as Beltane approaches and pressure mounts to find a blood-marked candidate to stop Cormac. Madame Chastain confirms that Bristol Keats shows no magical aptitude and is mortal-bound. Sloane argues she should be dismissed, citing her parentage and lack of progress, but Casta blocks the motion, and Melazin supports keeping Bristol briefly longer. After the meeting, Tygan learns council members are demanding Bristol's removal after discovering her lineage. Casta presses Tygan to send her home, but he insists Bristol still has value as a last resort, revealing she could be used as leverage against Mare if necessary. Casta warns this strategy could provoke disaster. Their conversation exposes Tygan's growing emotional involvement with Bristol, including his nightly invisible dances with her, which other officers have begun to notice. Despite the risk to his position and the secrecy surrounding Bristol's parents, Tygan refuses to let her go and orders Casta to keep his actions quiet. In Chapter 47, Tygan confronts his growing attachment to Bristol and the consequences of continuing to deceive her. He recalls Kyrus's final warning to walk away and recognizes the parallel to his current situation. What began as a single dance has become an emotional bond that deepens through shared conversations, mutual respect, and unspoken intimacy. Tygan realizes his feelings are not the result of Beltane's influence, but something lasting and personal. At the same time, he acknowledges the reality he has been hiding from Bristol. The search for her father is largely a charade. Tygan already believes Kyrus is avoiding cities and heading toward the wilds in Balor Pass, where knights are positioned to capture him. This knowledge makes Tygan's manipulation of Bristol increasingly unbearable, especially because she has pledged her trust and help. Despite repeated warnings from others and his own doubts, Tygan admits he cannot bring himself to walk away, even knowing the danger this attachment poses. In Chapter 48, Bristol meets Tygan at the ancient stables at dawn, fearing he may be preparing to dismiss her from training. Instead, Tygan brings her to a secluded indoor ring for extra stick fighting practice, focusing on a skill she already has and may rely on if magic fails her. He seals the room for privacy and explains his lineage as a Tuatha de Descendant, clarifying that his power manipulates existing energy rather than creating it. He emphasizes that physical combat remains essential even for powerful Fae. During training, Bristol improves quickly, demonstrating focus and adaptability. She successfully strikes Tygan, briefly gaining the upper hand, but he counters and pins her, creating an intense moment where their mutual attraction becomes undeniable. When Bristol confronts him about their connection, Tygan shuts it down and insists they are only training. Hurt and angry, Bristol ends the session and leaves, declaring she will no longer meet him at the Hazel Grove. In Chapter 49, Bristol wrestles with the urge to leave Danu, echoing her mother's lifelong instinct to move on whenever attachment or disappointment grew too heavy. Hurt by Tygan's dismissal of their connection and discouraged by her lack of magical progress, she considers abandoning Danu entirely. Although Madame Chastain now praises her flawless incantation delivery, Bristol still produces no magic, confirming she offers no tangible results the kingdom needs. From Thistle Lookout, she studies the distant peaks of Amaster and begins seriously considering traveling there, reasoning that Danu has yielded only dead ends in her search for her father. Yet, she hesitates, realizing how deeply she now cares about Elfham, its people, its art, and its role in shaping her father's life, and therefore her own. Remembering her parents' lessons about survival, perspective, and navigation, Bristol resolves not to run. She decides to forge her own path and actively seek her father, even if that means crossing the wilds alone. In Chapter 50, Bristol arrives late to Ceridwen Hall and finds herself locked out by Master Reuben, a punishment she quietly welcomes. After rejoining the other recruits, they head to the training grounds where the maze has returned, larger and more dangerous than before. The maze's purpose remains unchanged, to force recruits to locate the hidden door that might awaken a blood-marked talent capable of stopping Cormac. Despite weeks of training, no one has yet revealed such an ability, though all the remaining recruits are still under consideration. Bristol reflects on the group's growing bond and shared hope, even as uncertainty persists. She worries especially about Avery, who struggles with confidence despite some elemental skill. Bristol privately acknowledges she is not Fae and cannot perform magic, a truth she has shared only with the group. As the maze shifts ominously below, Rose expresses confidence that one of them will succeed today, renewing their collective resolve. In Chapter 51, Tygan prepares the maze with Casta, adding deadlier obstacles to simulate the dangers of the wilds near Fomoria. He resolves to sever his personal involvement with Bristol, recognizing that any attachment to her threatens Elfham, his oath, and the plan to stop Cormac. From the observation deck, Julia watches Tygan closely. The night before, she confronted him, revealing she knows the true identities of the Butcher of Telwyth and the Darkland Monster, and warning him to stop his dangerous involvement with Bristol. Julia admits she is not blood-marked, but claims significant power and hints at future interference by subtly attacking him with earth magic before vanishing. As training is about to begin, Tygan notices senior officers observing the recruits closely, clearly preparing to cull someone. Bristol remains unaware, focused on her companions. Tygan resolves to stay detached and accept whatever decision the officers make regarding her future. In Chapter 52, the recruits gather for the maze trial as an unseen disturbance infiltrates the training grounds. Madame Chastain senses something wrong and alerts the other instructors, prompting a sudden halt to the exercise. As knights search the area, an unanchored shadow is spotted moving independently across the ground. Melazin pins it with a thrown spear, forcing the shadow to take form. It becomes a dying Danu knight, Liam, who has been bound to the shadow. He reveals that his partner, Nissa, killed herself and that he failed to act in time. The knights realize they failed to save him. Tygan comforts Liam as he dies, promising him peace. With his final words, Liam urges them to run, warning of greater danger. The incident confirms that hostile forces are already inside Danu's borders and escalating. In Chapter 53, the attack on Danu escalates into full battle. Tygan orders the recruits evacuated underground as a massive storm and a swarm of Hyagan ridden by the restless dead descend on the training grounds. Knights mobilize instantly, erecting magical defenses and engaging the attackers in the air and on the ground. Amid the chaos, Bristol realizes Rose is still inside the maze and disobeys orders to rescue her. she fights through the living maze, frees Rose from ensnaring vines, and escapes deeper into the labyrinth to avoid a wounded enemy creature blocking their path. Overhead, Taigen battles relentlessly, killing multiple foes, including the restless dead warrior Rolek, while questioning why the attack reached Danu's core. The assault finally breaks, but casualties are severe. Cully is gravely wounded but survives. 2 archers are killed. When Cully reports that Bristol ran into the maze and is missing, Taigen abandons everything and races toward the maze to find her. In Chapter 54, Bristol struggles to guide an injured Rose through the maze as the battle noise abruptly stops, signaling danger. A stalker follows them, and just as they near the exit, they are confronted by Brager, a grotesquely muscled member of the Restless Dead. He blocks their escape and demands to be recognized. Bristol positions Rose behind her and attempts to create an opening. When Brager attacks, Bristol strikes him with a pole, but it enrages him. He flings Bristol aside and grabs Rose by the throat. Bristol recovers and drives the pole into Brager's eye, forcing him to release Rose, who collapses near the exit, unmoving. Enraged and wounded, Brager advances on Bristol. She taunts him to draw his focus away from Rose, but he overpowers her, pinning her to the ground and choking her. Bristol attempts magic unsuccessfully as she begins to lose consciousness. As death nears, she glimpses someone approaching behind Brager. In Chapter 55, Taigen confronts Brager as the Restless Dead holds a sword to Bristol's throat, using her as leverage. Taigen cannot use magic without risking her life and instead provokes Brager verbally, pretending Bristol means nothing to him to keep the mage focused and stall for time. Brager demands confirmation, and Bristol weakly agrees, reinforcing the ruse. Taigen exploits Brager's obsession with his lost status and past glory, especially his resentment over the title of noble, to inflame his ego and distract him. As Brager boasts and argues, Cosette silently approaches from behind, positioning herself for a strike. Taigen continues baiting Brager until the mage turns to look. Cosette decapitates Brager in a single precise blow. Taigen lunges forward, deflects Brager's falling body, and catches the sword mid-air before it can harm Bristol, ending the immediate threat. In Chapter 56, Bristol regains consciousness after the attack to find Taigen kneeling over her, applying healing magic to her crushed throat. He stabilizes her breathing, confirms nothing is broken, and eases the swelling while keeping her focused and still. Costa reassures Bristol that Rose is alive and being treated by Esme and Olivia. Taigen continues the healing until Bristol can breathe and see clearly again. Then Madame Chastain intervenes and insists on finishing the treatment, ordering Taigen to have his injured hand tended. Bristol notices Taigen's blood on her skin and senses his fear and concern, which contradicts his earlier claim that she meant nothing to him. Despite this, Taigen allows himself to be pulled away by Casta and leaves Bristol in Madame Chastain's care, reinforcing the emotional distance he is forcing between them even after saving her life. In Chapter 57, the knights secure the ground after the attack while Taigen's wound are treated by Esme under Casta's watch. The officers determine that the fallen knight, Liam, was unknowingly used as a herald, his shadow relaying information to Cormac, confirming the attack was intentional and tied to the upcoming choosing ceremony. Rose is alive but badly injured, with serious damage to her shoulder that threatens her ability to fly. Cosette reports that Bristol nearly escaped the maze, navigating it with impossible accuracy, raising suspicions that she was tracked or guided. The officers consider the possibility that Bristol carries a tick, a hidden magical weapon used for tracking. When confronted, Bristol angrily denies having anything unusual except a lifelong birthmark. At their insistence, she reveals it. The reaction is immediate and alarmed. Taigen stops her and states plainly that the mark is not a birthmark, confirming Bristol carries something dangerous and unknown. In Chapter 58, Taigen brings Bristol to Madame Chastain's treatment chambers and summons the High Witch and Heiress to examine the mark on her back in private. Despite Taigen's attempts to delay, Bristol insists on seeing it immediately. Refusing to send anyone away, she believes the mark must be a bruise or injury from the battle or the maze. Using mirrors, the witches expose the mark by cutting away her shirt. When Bristol finally sees it, her reaction is immediate and severe. The mark is unmistakably not a birthmark or bruise. Panic overwhelms her as she realizes something foreign and dangerous is embedded in her skin. She demands it be removed at once, screaming as fear takes hold. Physically weakened and unable to flee, Bristol collapses, vomiting from shock and terror. confirming that whatever was placed on her is real, intentional, and deeply embedded, escalating her personal danger and the stakes for everyone involved. In Chapter 59, Bristol is restrained in Madame Chastain's treatment chamber while the High Witch examines the massive tick embedded beneath her skin. The creature is far larger than any known tick and reacts as if aware. Madame Chastain concludes it has been attached to Bristol for over 20 years, likely placed there deliberately in the mortal world to suppress her magic. The witches attempt removal, using calming oils and spells, but the tick resists. When partially extracted, it lashes out violently, injuring Madame Chastain and burning Bristol with its blood, before retreating deeper into her body. The attempt is halted to prevent killing Bristol, and her burn is healed while she is kept unconscious. The High Witch determines the tick is saturated with decades of stored magic and refuses to release it. She insists the Lumessa, the ancient former High Witch, must be consulted. Teigen agrees to personally retrieve her. As he carries Bristol away, signs of newly released magic appear in her body, confirming she is not mortal-bound. In Chapter 60, Teigen carries Bristol to her room and lays her gently on her bed while she remains unconscious from the High Witch's potion. He knows he must leave to retrieve the Lumessa, even though the tick is still embedded in Bristol's back and she will wake without him there. He arranges for Casta to oversee her care and ensure her needs are met. Teigen lingers, holding Bristol's hand and noting the deep blue pointed nail beds that confirm her magic has been partially released and that she is not mortal-bound. He reflects on the uncertainty shared by Olivia and Madame Chastain about what Bristol truly is, realizing even they do not understand the transformation. Recalling Mare's appearance and dismissing glamour as an explanation, Teigen grows more troubled. He heals a small cut on Bristol's brow, wishing he could do more, and resolves to humble himself completely to secure the Lumessa's help, no matter the cost. In Chapter 61, Kyrus meets with Winkip, a Trow doorward, to send a secret message to Bristol. Winkip provides a small piece of parchment and explains that a covert contact inside the palace will discreetly deliver the note. Kyrus questions the risk and loyalty of a palace insider working with Trows, but accepts the arrangement. He insists he needs to see his daughter in person, arguing that he already risked himself to save the king's son, but Winkip refuses, citing increased danger. Winkip warns Kyrus to be careful with his wording, to conceal the note's origin, and to avoid mentioning Trows in case it is intercepted. Kyrus writes the message, seals it, and hands it over. Winkip explains delivery may take time because access to Bristol is tightly controlled and she is never alone. Kyrus remains confident Bristol will find a way to reach him so he can tell her the full truth. In Chapter 62, Teigen returns to the conservatory and learns an emergency full council meeting has been convened in his absence. Ivy reports Cully is recovering and that Bristol has remained isolated in her room. In the rotunda, several council members, led by Lord Shorba, argue that Bristol should be killed, fearing her hidden magic and loyalty as Mare's daughter. Teigen forcefully shuts this down, declaring any such plotting treason. Eris confirms Bristol is in shock and barely functioning after learning the truth about herself. Sloane publicly suggests using Bristol as a hostage to force Mare and Cormac's hand, echoing Teigen's earlier private thought and exposing it to the council. Though Teigen insists it would only ever be a last resort, the idea gains traction. The council agrees to secrecy. Later, Teigen's officers confront him about the danger of this thinking, while Madame Chastain urges distance from Bristol and orders Teigen to reassert royal authority. In Chapter 63, Bristol isolates herself in her room for 4 days, replaying her life in light of the truth that her mother, Lyanna Keats, was Fae. She re-examines childhood memories that now make sense, including sudden moves, her mother's panic around magic, unexplained knowledge gaps, shifting appearances, and frantic rituals meant to suppress Bristol's abilities. Bristol realizes her parents deliberately hid the truth and placed a magical tick on her when she was very young to suppress her power and keep her hidden from Fae enemies. Madame Chastain confirms the tick likely fed on Bristol's magic for years and swelled when she crossed into Elfham. Bristol recalls a childhood moment when her mother briefly appeared monstrous, dismissed as a costume. She learns Frida noticed her latent abilities years earlier. As the injured tick leaks magic back into her blood, Bristol can now perform basic spells with ease. She struggles with hunger, identity, distrust of Fae, and the realization that Teigen may have lied, leaving her uncertain, altered, and emotionally unmoored. In Chapter 64, Hollis infiltrates the hallways in mouse form, so the recruits can secretly visit Bristol after being repeatedly turned away. They force their way into her room and find her withdrawn and unwashed, still shaken by recent events. Rose confirms she is healing and reassures Bristol about her injuries. The recruits insist on bathing, feeding, and dressing Bristol, shielding her back so she doesn't have to reveal the tick. They explain that Danu plans to bring recruits to the upcoming Beltane Eve celebration to reassure other kingdoms after the attack, and that the recruits performed well in battle. Bristol admits she is Fae, and that her parents suppressed her magic with the tick to keep her hidden. Rumors are spreading among the gentry due to Bristol's absence and fear after the attack. The recruits reveal Tygan was away retrieving a powerful sorceress. Realizing her isolation worsens suspicion, Bristol decides to attend the festivities and commits to staying in Danu until their mission is complete. In Chapter 65, Bristol prepares to attend the evening festivities at Suncourt, delayed by insecurity about her appearance and the rumors surrounding her. She chooses a pale blue dress meant to appear harmless and cheerful, and uses glamour to hide the blue, claw-like nail beds that reveal her emerging magic, learning the technique from her fellow recruits. Despite her efforts, she hesitates to join the gathering, aware Tegan has returned, but has not come to see her. She briefly hides in an alcove, sensing fear beneath the court's celebration, likely caused by the recent attack and uncertainty about her. As she finally moves toward the stairs, Reuben confronts her, accusing her of skipping duties and telling her she does not belong and should leave Elfame. Bristol refuses, quietly retaliates with a small act of magic, and then forces herself to descend the staircase, choosing to be seen and to face the court rather than retreat. In Chapter 66, Tygan drinks with Quinn, Dalagorn, Glennis, and Casta at the festivities after returning with the Lumessa, but his attention remains fixed on Bristol. He reflects on her need for space and realizes his feelings for her have deepened into love, intensified by nearly losing her to Brager. The group notices Bristol has finally left her room and is seated with the other recruits, who form a protective ring around her as the gentry watch with suspicion and fear. Some council members observe her with calculating interest, viewing her as a potential hostage. Tygan senses danger when Reuben hurries toward Bristol. He intercepts Reuben, who accuses Bristol of magically burning his robe and demands she be expelled. Tygan blocks him, dismisses the accusation, and firmly warns Reuben to stay away from Bristol, asserting his authority and claiming her as his recruit, forcing Reuben to back down. In Chapter 67, Bristol attends the festivities despite hostile whispers and fearful scrutiny from powerful Fae. As tension builds, Tygan publicly approaches her in formal royal attire and asks her to dance, making the invitation loud and unmistakable so all can hear. Though wary, Bristol accepts. Tygan leads her to the center of the plaza, deliberately placing them in full view of the court. Their dance is open and intimate, not hidden by magic, signaling his refusal to deny their connection or her place in Danu. As they dance, the crowd gradually relaxes, others join in, and the rumors fade beneath music and celebration. Tygan's public gesture reframes Bristol from threat to someone claimed and protected by the king. When the night ends, they leave together and stop at Bristol's chamber door. Though Tygan hesitates to cross the threshold, Bristol invites him inside, choosing closeness instead of distance. In Chapter 68, Bristol brings Tygan into her chamber and confirms she wants him there despite her uncertainty about everything else in her life. Tygan asks for her consent and admits he stopped himself before because of doubt and outside pressures, but now chooses to listen only to her. They acknowledge their long-suppressed feelings and act on them, ending their mutual restraint. Tygan reassures Bristol that he wants her exactly as she is, including the parts she fears and hides. Their intimacy is mutual, deliberate, and real rather than hidden or magical, marking a shift from denial to acceptance for both of them. Tygan admits he has wanted her for a long time and regrets not saying it sooner, while Bristol admits she imagined this moment as well. The chapter ends with them together emotionally and physically connected and sharing quiet laughter, signaling trust, commitment, and a turning point in their relationship. In Chapter 69, Kyrus returns to the abandoned cottage hidden deep in the wilds, a place untouched since he and Mare fled Elfham. The setting triggers memories of their first days together, when mutual suspicion turned into intimacy and then into a shared desire to escape their violent pasts. Over weeks, They discussed abandoning their roles as the Darkland Monster and the Butcher of Kelvith to start a new life. Eventually, Mare agreed. She closed the Abyss door and other portals out of Elfhame to prevent pursuit, while Kyrus sold his possessions, including his Gildan sword, to the Trows to fund their escape. They were moments from leaving when Taigen arrived, ending their plan in bloodshed. Standing at the cottage now, Kyrus recalls walking away after stabbing Taigen, believing the conflict unfinished. He realizes Taigen now holds leverage by having Bristol and vows that the struggle between them is not over. In Chapter 70, Bristol wakes beside Taigen after spending the night together, realizing the intimacy and trust they now share. As dawn breaks, she reflects on his vulnerability and the scar from Kyrus's betrayal, sensing pain that has never fully healed. A knock interrupts them, and Bristol sends Taigen to hide in the bath chamber to avoid gossip. Madame Chastain arrives unexpectedly with breakfast and informs Bristol she has been summoned to meet the Lumessa immediately, as the sorceress's strength is limited. The High Witch prepares Bristol's clothing and warns her that personal entanglements must not interfere with her sworn commitment to Elfhame. Taigen reveals himself briefly, challenging the limits of the meeting, but Madame Chastain insists the Lumessa will see Bristol alone to address the tick's removal. Before leaving, Taigen privately assures Bristol that what happened between them is not a mere dalliance. In Chapter 71, Bristol is escorted by Madame Chastain to the top floor of the conservatory to meet the Lumessa, Jasmine, the former High Witch of Danu. Bristol learns Jasmine is her father Kyrus's foster aunt and the woman who raised him in Elfhame. Jasmine introduces Bristol to notable figures, and then brings her to Selwith Hall, explaining her long service, declining health, and the burdens of power. Jasmine reveals Kyrus's origins. He was a mortal child stolen in 1890, identified years later as the missing son of Sanjay Kumar and Catherine Brennan, who died long before he could be returned. Raised by Jasmine and the sisters, Kyrus became an artist and later a knight before leaving Elfhame suddenly. The sisters confirm his strength, but admit they do not know why he left or why he later placed a tick on Bristol. Examining Bristol, Jasmine explains the tick can likely be removed, but warns it carries a risk of death and unknown transformative consequences, especially if Bristol is blood-marked. With the choosing ceremony approaching, Bristol asks for time to decide. In Chapter 72, Bristol contacts Kat and Harper through the portal, and explains she has not yet found their father, though the Fae are helping her search. Kat presses for Bristol to come home, but Bristol deflects and learns that their father's painting sold for $5 million to an anonymous admirer, easing their financial worries. Bristol then reveals what she has learned about their father's origins, including his birth name, Ryan Kumar, and his mortal parents. As she begins to explain the truth about her birthmark, Kat reacts with visible distress and admits she already knew, having promised their father not to tell Bristol unless something happened. Furious and betrayed, Bristol confronts Kat, revealing the tick and her altered nails. Harper is left confused as the sisters argue. Overcome with anger and hurt, Bristol lashes out, and in the surge of emotion, the portal abruptly closes. She desperately tries to reopen it, but Kat and Harper are gone, leaving Bristol alone and shaken. In Chapter 73, Bristol hides in the shadows of the throne room, still reeling from her confrontation with Kat and the revelation that her sister knew about the secret on her back. She wrestles with anger and betrayal, but also recognizes Kat's guilt and pain, deciding she will eventually send a message of understanding through Eris, though not yet. Watching the proceedings, Bristol observes Taigen acting as king, formally hearing petitions and granting pledges that give the Fae renewed hope. She realizes he commands respect naturally and is well suited to leadership, balancing strategy, duty, and care for his people. Bristol knows she must speak with him soon, intending to start with Kyrus's letter. She avoids telling Taigen that she is considering keeping the tick, torn between the danger of removing it and the unknown changes it could cause. With the choosing ceremony approaching and Danu running out of time, Bristol hides her blue nails with glamour and retreats, postponing her decision. In Chapter 74, Taigen presides over the throne room while anxiously waiting for news about Bristol and the tick. Most petitions concern protection, as shadow creatures continue to menace Elfhame. A villager from Rookswood begs that if his missing son Samuel is found taken by the shadows, the knights grant him a swift, merciful death. Taigen orders Samuel's name spread throughout the realm. Another villager urges Teigen not to yield to Fomoria or Cormac, warning that surrender would doom Elfame. Teigen gives a guarded response, refusing to reveal his true intentions. At last, Bristol petitions him privately. She asks to send a letter to her sisters and confesses she has not removed the tick because doing so risks death and unpredictable transformation. She also admits she lied earlier and secretly entered Teigen's study, discovering and later closing a hidden portal to the mortal world. Teigen becomes visibly shaken by the study and Bristol leads him away. In Chapter 75, Bristol helps Teigen recover after he nearly collapses in his study. Pressed to explain what happened, Teigen finally reveals the truth behind his scar. He was stabbed with a legendary demon-forged blade that allows demons to invade the victim's mind through their blood. For months, Teigen endured repeated mental assaults, nightmares, and possession attempts unable to stop them. Potions could not cure the effect, and he was restrained from using magic. After nearly killing Quinn during one episode, Teigen isolated himself in his study, marking the walls to track each surviving attack. The demons eventually ceased, but the trauma remains. He explains the friend who stabbed him betrayed Danu and joined the enemy. Afterward, Teigen reassures Bristol that her ability to detect and close a portal may extend to other dangerous passages. Bristol realizes the portal likely came from Angus, her family's ferret, suggesting he may not be an ordinary animal. In Chapter 76, Eris observes the recruits training in the forest and notes rising morale and success. 2 weeks earlier, he and Dahlia confirmed that only burrow-making animals or blood-marked individuals can detect and close burrows, and Bristol has since closed 3 more. The recruits are growing stronger together, and Teigen wants them confident for Beltane Eve to reassure other kingdoms. Despite this progress, the larger threat remains. The Fomorians and Cormac's army continue to grow, and closing burrows is not the same as sealing true portals to the abyss. Bristol has not yet been able to open and close a full portal, and there are no spells or instructions to teach this ability. The injured tick continues to leak small amounts of magic into her, but uncertainty remains about what she truly is. Bristol's questions about her father concern Eris and Dahlia, and they have instructed others to be cautious. Eris also worries that Teigen's public relationship with Bristol could become a risk just as urgent news arrives from Quinn. In Chapter 77, Bristol and Teigen grow openly affectionate during training, no longer hiding their relationship. Quinn returns from Bowskeep, and Teigen intercepts him privately, while Bristol goes to weapons training. Bristol reflects on how deeply connected she and Teigen have become, her growing confidence in her powers, and her hope for a future with him once the conflict ends. She continues to keep the tick, gaining steady magical ability, and the recruits' skills are rapidly improving as a group. Quinn reports that Bristol's letter was delivered and read by her sisters, deeply affecting Kat. More critically, Quinn confirms their suspicions about Angus. He is actually Fritz, a shape-shifting fae and former knight thought dead, who created the burrow between Bowskeep and Teigen's study and helped Kyrus steal the art. Fritz is now hiding, but knights remain in Bowskeep to protect the sisters. The chapter ends with troubling news that a scouting party led by Officer Dervey has gone missing in the Welkie lands, prompting increased search efforts. In Chapter 78, weapons training pauses for an afternoon repast, and Bristol joins the other recruits in the meadow. They reminisce about the ordinary lives and relationships they left behind in the mortal world, reinforcing what they are fighting to return to. The group celebrates their recent success in drills and their growing confidence. The conversation turns to Bristol and Teigen's relationship, and while Bristol avoids naming it as love, she admits she feels deeply connected to him and wants to see what their bond becomes after the war. She distracts the others by demonstrating improved levitation, showing her steadily advancing magic despite still carrying the tick. The recruits' camaraderie and teamwork are emphasized, highlighting how their powers complement one another. The scene ends with Melusine and Cosette approaching to resume weapons training, signaling a return to discipline and preparation as the looming conflict draws closer. In Chapter 79, Bristol and Teigen visit the valley that holds the Stone of Destiny, the ancient rock that awakens during the choosing ceremony to name Elfham's next ruler. Teigen explains the Mother Ring and how the stone will proclaim a king or queen if one steps forward, otherwise leaving Cormac as the only claimant guarded by his forces. Bristol realizes how central the valley will be to the coming conflict and silently hopes closing the Abyss portal could change the outcome. While resting in the valley, Teigen unexpectedly asks Bristol if she loves him. After hesitation, she admits she does, and Tigan openly returns the declaration, confessing he has loved her since early in their time together and wants to share his life with her. Their mutual confession deepens their bond, shifting their relationship from unspoken attachment to explicit commitment as the choosing ceremony and war approach. In Chapter 80, the sisters review their research late at night after studying Elphame's histories and grimoires. Izzy confronts Jasmine about withholding the full truth from Bristol. Jasmine explains that Bristol is already frightened and cannot yet be told what she is likely to become, though Adela insists the outcome is inevitable. The sisters reveal a grim conclusion. The tick cannot be safely removed while Bristol lives. To force it to release her, her heart would have to be stopped, even if only briefly, though Jasmine knows the only certain way to prevent what Bristol will become is to stop her heart permanently. Camille mourns Bristol, recognizing Kyrus in her and believing she is good, while acknowledging Kyrus once was too. When asked what they will tell Madame Chastain, Jasmine insists they will say nothing beyond continuing their research. Privately, Jasmine accepts the terrible truth and resolves to keep it secret for now. In Chapter 81, Tigan prepares to lead Danu's procession into the Beltane Eve celebration at Timbercrest Castle, now keenly aware that every eye in Elfhame is judging him as king. Eris obsessively fusses over details, underscoring the heightened stakes in Kael's absence. When the trumpet sounds, Danu enters last, silencing the ballroom as rumors about Tigan's survival, power, and intentions swirl among the assembled rulers. Tigan meets the scrutinizing gazes of Elphame's monarchs, recognizing their unspoken question, whether he will submit to Cormac or lead Elphame into war. With Kael still captive, none are willing to oppose Fomoria without proof that Danu has a viable plan. Tigan descends, greeting King Roderick, but halts proceedings to make a statement. Defying expectation and strict protocol, he signals that Danu will present something unexpected, prompting the herald to announce the royal elite squad of the Danu nation. In Chapter 82, the recruits, disguised as an elite squad, make a show-stopping entrance at the Beltane Eve ball. Their synchronized staircase descent and flawlessly executed. Danu stick dance, blended with modern moves, astonish the ballroom and spark excited whispers among the gentry. The spectacle, choreographed by Eris, builds mystique and positions the recruits as figures of intrigue and power. After the performance, they are formally introduced to King Roderick and other monarchs following a tightly controlled script. Tigan and Eris work behind the scenes, using the recruits' image to subtly negotiate alliances and revive trust among rulers who had conceded to Fomoria. The group maintains secrecy about their roles, avoiding questions and specific rulers as instructed. After mingling successfully, the officers finally allow them to relax. While the recruits revel in their success, Bristol's attention is drawn across the ballroom to someone from Bowskeep, someone she never expected to see in Elfham. In Chapter 83, Bristol walks through the Timbercrest Gardens with Princess Georgina, formerly Mare Tops, who reveals her Fae identity and updates Bristol on her sisters, who are thriving in Bowskeep. Their conversation touches on magic, love, and duty. Georgie warns Bristol not to be consumed by Elphame's politics, but Bristol insists she has a promise to keep and asks Georgie to look after her sisters. Back inside, the ball is interrupted when King Cormac of Fomoria unexpectedly arrives, stunning the crowd. Tigan orders the recruits discreetly removed and confronts Cormac directly. Their exchange is tense, filled with veiled threats and references to Kael, Tigan's captive brother. Cormac reveals he has met Bristol before, under the name Mick, and taunts Tigan with cruel insinuations. Unable to hold back, Tigan punches Cormac across the ballroom. Though Cormac plays the victim before the assembled royals, his veiled threats escalate. Tigan, undeterred, counters with a warning of his own about Mare's potential fury. In Chapter 84, Melusine pulls Bristol aside after her encounter with Cormac, urging her to stay composed and remember she holds secret power. She is blood-marked, a truth Cormac doesn't yet know. Melusine reminds her that secrets are power, and that Cormac's curiosity makes him vulnerable. Bristol confesses her past with Mick, not realizing at the time he was Cormac. Melusine suspects he targeted Bristol to determine if she was blood-marked. Alarmed for her sister's safety, Bristol learns Tigan has already assigned knights to protect them. Melusine reassures her that Cormac likely remains unaware of her power, as she hasn't used magic recently. In Melusine's room, she helps Bristol recompose herself with a fey perfume meant to repel Cormac, and explains that the High Witch needs a lock of her hair for magical tracking. Bristol complies. Before they return to the ball, Bristol vows not to be underestimated again and to make Cormac regret ever doing so. In Chapter 85, Bristol returns to the ballroom and immediately spots Cormac, once known to her as Mick, dancing confidently, his danger fully on display. Determined to regain control, she accepts Tigan's offer to dance, maintaining their cover as members of the elite squad. They discuss Cormac's threats and the growing political tension. Cormac then cuts in and Bristol boldly accepts, intent on unsettling him. During their tense dance, she feeds him cryptic hints about Cale, pretending he visited her in a dream as a dreamwalker, which visibly rattles Cormac. As his composure falters, he suddenly whisks her away using magic, disappearing from the ballroom with her. Tigan, Eris, Melusine, and Madame Chastain react swiftly. Using the enchanted lock of Bristol's hair, the High Witch and Eris perform a tracking spell. Bristol's vision reveals a wisteria-covered terrace with a red starburst and granite circle, which Cully identifies as the Lower South Gardens, where Cormac has taken her. In Chapter 86, Bristol is teleported by Cormac to a secluded terrace via a dark ado leap, leaving her breathless and shaken. When she lashes out, they briefly struggle, but she regains control by feigning fear. Cormac demands information, and Bristol crafts a false narrative about Cale being a dreamwalker who appeared to her in dreams, claiming palace gossip supports it. The tale unnerves Cormac, planting doubt and fear that Cale may be spreading secrets. As he pulls her close, Bristol spots signals from Rose and Hollis. Moments later, Tigan and his knights arrive, surrounding them, only for Cormac's own warriors and a massive army of the restless dead to appear in return. Bristol diffuses the standoff by pretending the meeting was innocent, offering Cormac an exit while securing the hair she pulled from him. Cormac departs, but his show of power leaves everyone rattled. Bristol orders a private meeting. Her counterplay has begun. In Chapter 87, Bristol gathers the team in her chamber and reveals she tore fresh hair from Cormac's head, enough for a tracking spell. With Madame Chastain's magic, Quinn and Cully use the enchanted smoke to follow Cormac's journey in real time. He is seen riding through the Fomorian wilderness to Queen's Cliff, an ancient remote fortress. There, they confirm Cale is alive, imprisoned, and bound with a magic-suppressing collar. Bristol had lied to Cormac, claiming Cale was a dreamwalker, successfully baiting him into revealing Cale's location. Eris swears everyone to secrecy. After the others leave, Tigan, overwhelmed with fear and relief, pulls Bristol into his arms. Despite his anger over her risk-taking, their emotions boil over and they make love, wild and intense, sealing their bond physically and emotionally. Tigan vows never to lose her again, and Bristol promises she's not going anywhere, not without him. The chapter ends with their connection stronger than ever. In Chapter 88, Tigan and Bristol return to the ballroom in fresh clothes, drawing attention but raising no questions. Rumors spread that the elite squad had forced Cormac's sudden retreat, reinforcing the illusion of their powerful influence. Tigan doesn't correct the gossip. Perception is strategic. Despite the danger, Bristol's bold move in deceiving Cormac and harvesting his hair is praised even by Cully, though some, like Dalagorn, remain uneasy due to her lineage. The night proves more successful than expected. Tigan's team now knows Cale's location and gains troop commitments from Greymarch and Idaris, contingent on Tigan attending the choosing ceremony and claiming the throne. The Queen of Gildaway also agrees to accelerate sword production for Danu's knights. Yet, Cormac's vast army of the restless dead remains a looming threat. Knowing weapons alone won't be enough, Tigan decides to secretly take Bristol to a hidden portal in the wilds, one she can use to begin practicing real magic. In Chapter 89, Bristol is led to an ancient hidden portal in the wilds near Timbercrest. Though invisible, she instinctively finds it, confirming her connection as a bloodmarked. As the portal reveals a view of the mortal world, including city streets and cars, she feels its overwhelming pull, but is held back by Tigan, aware she lacks her time mark. Madame Chastain then instructs her to close the portal, but despite multiple attempts using spells and willpower, Bristol fails. Desperate, she suspects the magical tick on her back is blocking her power. In a bold move, she pulls Madame Chastain aside and demands she stab her to release more of the creature's blood. The High Witch reluctantly complies, causing Bristol intense pain and triggering the tick to recoil. Despite Tigan's alarm and the team's uproar, Bristol pushes through the agony, punches her glowing hand into the portal, and utters a sealing spell. The portal vanishes. successfully closed. In Chapter 90, spirits are high as the group travels to Tygan's farm for a more traditional Beltane celebration after Bristol successfully closed the portal. The recruits celebrate, confident in their progress and hopeful for the battles ahead. At the farm, the festivities are humble. Cooking, flower gathering, and bonfire preparations replace courtly formalities. Bristol and Tygan share a moment of intimacy, but the mood is clouded by underlying concerns. Tygan reflects on his childhood encounter with the god Amathion and the path he abandoned to become a warrior and king. Meanwhile, tensions rise among his officers. Though Bristol's actions brought victory, her independence worries them. Her deception of Cormac and her decision to have Madame Chastain stab her without permission trigger fears about her growing power and resemblance to her unpredictable parents. Tygan keeps quiet, but he notices a troubling change. A line of golden scales now appears along Bristol's shoulder, a possible side effect of awakening the magic inside her. In Chapter 91, Tygan and Bristol ride together on August, the legendary battle steed, during the Beltane parade through the hamlet. August, proud and fierce, tolerates Bristol's presence only mildly, until she scratches behind his ear, winning his reluctant approval. The crowd marvels at the elite squad's growing mythos. Back at the palace, however, a hidden threat brews. While most are away celebrating, an unnamed intruder sneaks into Bristol's chambers and plants a secret note, hiding it in a place only she will find. Using a cleansing spell, the intruder erases all traces of their presence, including their powerful aura. May facilitated the contact, knowing the intruder owed a favor to a trowel. The note's contents are unknown, but the intent is clear: to manipulate Bristol into returning to the mortal world, or prepare for other measures if she doesn't. The chapter closes with a deepening sense of danger as unseen forces move against her. In Chapter 92, after 3 intense days of festivities, Tygan returns to the palace and heads straight to the war room to plan Cale's rescue, telling Bristol to rest. She offers to join, but is denied, sparking a tense exchange about trust, leadership, and her decision to dance with Cormac. Though tempers flare, they reconcile before parting. As Bristol returns to her room, she reflects on what might be their first real argument. Once inside, she finds her room beautifully prepared with food, wine, and flowers, clearly arranged to comfort her. As she settles in, she discovers a tiny folded note tucked into her hairbrush. At first assuming it's a love note from Tygan, she opens it, only to realize it's something else entirely. Unbeknownst to her, it was planted by a mysterious intruder while the palace was nearly empty during Beltane, potentially designed to manipulate or threaten her and change the course of her choices. In Chapter 93, Tygan, exhausted and guilty, joins his officers in the war room to plan Cale's rescue. Haunted by having used a calming maneuver on Bristol against her will, he's defensive when his leadership is questioned. The team reviews old, unreliable Fomorian maps, debating tactics. They settle on a stealthy approach, land on a plateau, scale the cliffs, and use a glamoured hair as a proxy for Cale to avoid alerting Cormac. Separately, they begin narrowing the Abyss Portal's location using sightings of the restless dead. Meanwhile, Bristol discovers a mysterious note in her room signed Brihe, her father's private nickname for her. The message, in his handwriting, urges her to come alone to a distant forest, claiming his life depends on secrecy. Though suspicious, the note feels genuine. She decides to leave without telling anyone. As she prepares, she accidentally unleashes a powerful, uncontrolled fire spell, hinting at her growing volatile magic. Undeterred, she arms herself and slips away. In Chapter 94, Tygan is jolted awake by urgent news. Master Woodhouse reports that Tygan's destrier, August, and Bristol are both missing. Suspicious, Tygan rushes to Bristol's room and finds it empty, the ceiling scorched and bathwater covered in ash, evidence of a powerful, uncontrolled fire spell. Using a lock of her hair, Tygan casts a tracking spell and sees her riding across Tatha Bridge. The knights mobilize immediately, but Bristol, riding August at top speed, gains too much ground. Tygan can only track her path remotely. She reaches a fork and turns north toward the wilds. Bristol, following the instructions from the mysterious note, urges August forward, eventually arriving at the dark forest. A cloaked rider appears. Though glamoured and suspicious, Bristol doesn't flee. Tygan desperately tries to unveil the rider's true nature, but fails. Helplessly, he watches as Bristol chooses to follow the stranger into the forest, believing it will lead her to her father. In Chapter 95, Bristol follows the hooded, glamored horseman deeper into the wilds, debating whether to use fire or blades for protection. When he calls her Miss Keats, she becomes wary, knowing her name wasn't mentioned in the note. The man warns her not to fight. His magic is swifter and deadlier, and tells her he was hired only to lead her to the destination, not answer questions. Despite her fear, Bristol continues, determined to find her father. They emerge from the forest into a tranquil valley with a lone barn on the far side. The horseman declares this is as far as he goes and leaves. Bristol, still suspicious and noting how he knew her name, resolves to return safely with her father. She rides August across the valley, dismounts cautiously, and prepares for a trap. As she approaches the barn, the creaking of a hinge and the opening door signals someone inside. Her confrontation is moments away. In Chapter 96, Tigan continues using the smoke tracking spell to monitor Bristol's actions. He describes her entering a sunny valley with grazing deer and an old barn, her apparent destination. As she scans the area and dismounts, Tigan recognizes the location from memory and urges the group to depart quickly. They can reach it in minutes by air. But just as he rises to go, a new image grips him. The barn door creaks open, revealing a figure emerging from the shadows. Tigan freezes, overwhelmed by recognition. Though the man's face is obscured, Tigan immediately identifies him by his presence, posture, and the way he carries himself. It's Kyrus, Bristol's father. Tigan confirms aloud that Bristol is finally meeting him. The moment signals a critical turning point as the rescue team races to intervene and the long-sought father-daughter reunion begins under suspicious and dangerous circumstances. In Chapter 97, Bristol comes face to face with her father, Logan Keats, alive and transformed for the world of Elfhame. Though overjoyed at first, she is quickly shaken by his revelation. He faked his death with the help of Trows to come to Elfhame. Her grief, pain, and confusion erupt as she confronts him for abandoning their family and forcing them to mourn a false loss. Logan insists he did it to protect them, claiming he was chasing after Bristol's mother and needed their grief to seem real. He reveals he never feared the Trows. Instead, he was fleeing Tigan, who once was his best friend. Logan explains that time moves differently between worlds. Though months passed for him, years passed for Bristol. The chapter ends with a devastating truth. Tigan and Logan were once like brothers, and Tigan had sent hunters after him, making Bristol question everything she thought she knew. In Chapter 98, Tigan and his officers silently surround the barn, where Bristol is meeting her father, Kyrus. Tigan moves with cold precision, transformed into a hardened, vengeful commander. The officers notice change, especially Casta, who once loved Kyrus but now shares Tigan's resolve for justice. Tigan's orders are clear. If Bristol emerges with Kyrus, they are to capture her before Kyrus can act. If she exits alone, they are to remain hidden and let her leave unaware of the ambush. Cully will discreetly follow her to ensure she returns to the palace. Once Bristol is gone, the squad will attack, killing all of Kyrus's allies, but not Kyrus himself. Tigan wants him to suffer, not die easily. Before taking position, Tigan secretly commands August to take Bristol straight back to the palace no matter what. As Tigan waits in tense silence, he's still uncertain how he'll react if Bristol resists. In Chapter 99, Bristol reels from the truth that her father, Logan Keats, is the traitor who stabbed Tigan, his former best friend, to protect Bristol's mother, the so-called Darkland monster. Logan reveals that he and Tigan were sent to eliminate her, believing she was a danger to Danu, but Logan fell in love with her instead. He explains her tragic past. Sold to Cormac, the king of Fomoria, after her uncles abused and chained her for creating magical portals. Though Cormac treated her better, he manipulated her with power, turning her into a weapon. She left Logan and their children to protect them when Cormac threatened their lives. Bristol is devastated to learn her mother is still alive and possibly under Cormac's influence. She refuses to return home, determined to find and save her mother herself. Logan warns her of the danger, but Bristol asserts her independence, leaving him behind, shattered, pleading, and no longer the man she thought she knew. In Chapter 100, Bristol exits the barn in a dazed state, deeply shaken by her conversation with Kyrus. Tigan watches her closely, noting her silence and emotional collapse. After she rides away, determined but hollow, Tigan confronts Kyrus alone in the barn. Kyrus is armed and waiting, cloaked in magical protections and supported by powerful allies. Their exchange is bitter and personal. Tigan confronts Kyrus for stabbing him with a demon blade, for betraying their brotherhood, and for placing a cursed tick on Bristol to suppress her magic. Kyrus defends his actions as protective, insisting his loyalty lies with his wife and daughter, not Elfame. Tigan accuses him of conspiring with the enemy and using Bristol as a shield. As the rest of Tigan's knights appear and surround Kyrus, the weight of Kyrus's choices becomes clear. Despite Kyrus's plea for mercy and friendship, Tigan walks away, leaving the others to subdue Kyrus and take him to the palace for judgment. In chapter 101, Kat and Harper are taken to the back office of Sonia's gallery, where two FBI agents wait to question them about the Leonardo da Vinci sketches. Although the sketches are confirmed authentic, the agents are suspicious about their sudden appearance in the quiet town of Bowskeep. Kat and Harper give vague answers, claiming their sister Bristol found the drawings at a swap meet, but didn't specify which one or leave the book behind. When asked about Bristol's whereabouts, Kat blurts out that she went to Fairyland to find their dead father, frustrating the agents. Sonia quickly shuts the interview down, reminding them the sketches were never reported stolen and suggesting their attorney can handle further questions. After the agents leave, Harper expresses concern, but Sonia reassures them Bristol isn't in trouble, at least not legally. Though Sonia remains uneasy about Bristol's disappearance, she follows the sisters to Starkey's, trusting their confidence in her safety. In chapter 102, Bristol returns to the palace in emotional turmoil after confronting her father Kyrus. Racked with rage and betrayal, she reflects on the revelations, how her death was faked, how Mick used her, and how her parents made a bargain with Cormac. She feels betrayed by everyone, especially upon realizing Tigan and others knew the truth all along. Distraught, she lashes out at Cully, who tries to escort her, then wanders aimlessly through the palace. She eventually ends up at the Sun Court buffet, where Sashka, Rose, Hollis, Avery, and Julia welcome her. Though surrounded by friends, Bristol remains numb until she blurts out that she found her father. When she shares that her mother might be alive and unravels the truth about her parentage, her friends are shocked. Julia admits she knew, deepening Bristol's sense of betrayal, but the group reassures her they're still her team. Bristol vows to confront the king and officers next. In chapter 103, Tigan, Eris, and Dahlia gather in the council rotunda, waiting anxiously for word on Kyrus. Tigan, emotionally gutted after confronting his former friend, is still processing the betrayal. When the knights return, Dalagorn, Melazan, Cosette, Quinn, and Custa, they deliver shocking news. Kyrus has escaped. A mysterious shadow or night jump aided his disappearance, though Kyrus is immortal and shouldn't be capable of such magic. The team suspects an ally helped him, possibly someone from within the palace. Eris begins listing known fae who can night jump, including Olivia, Reuben, the sisters Izzy and Camille, and unexpectedly, Julia, whom Tigan insists they question. Meanwhile, Cully reports that Bristol returned to the palace but drew a knife on him. Proof that she knows the truth about Kyrus and is emotionally volatile. Eris believes her return shows loyalty, but Dahlia doubts it. Tigan prepares to speak with her, only for Bristol herself to arrive, pounding on the council door. In chapter 104, Bristol storms into the rotunda, her demeanor cold and unreadable. She publicly confronts the council, accusing them of betrayal for keeping the truth about her parents hidden. Specifically, that Leanna Keats, the Darkland monster, is her mother, and that the council planned to kill her. Bristol demands new terms, no harm to her mother, and a pardon for her father, Kyrus, after the portal is closed. The room erupts when Madame Chastain dismisses her, prompting Bristol to accidentally unleash a fireball at Tigan, which he deflects. Chastain restrains her with magic, but Tigan orders her released. Bristol reveals Kyrus contacted her with a note delivered secretly within the palace, proving he has an ally. An explosive argument between Bristol and Tigan escalates until he cruelly dismisses her parents' love as just a good fuck. Devastated, Bristol leaves, warning them to meet her demands. Tigan, shaken, orders Cully to follow her. Tensions among the council erupt as Eris and Dahlia clash. In chapter 105, Bristol, overwhelmed by betrayal and heartbreak, destroys her room in a fit of despair after Tigan's harsh words. Meanwhile, Tigan ignores warnings to give her space and heads to confront her. The hallway outside her room is strewn with his belongings, evidence of her emotional rejection. Inside, Bristol reflects on her childhood, her mother's protective spells, and her parents' hidden lives. Tigan enters uninvited, demanding clarity about their relationship. Their confrontation turns bitter as Bristol accuses him of never loving her and of using her, while Tigan confesses his intent to kill her father himself, not because of orders, but because of betrayal. Bristol calls him a liar, denying his declaration of love. Tigan, hurt but resolved, leaves, noting Eris is trying to meet her demands even at great cost. Their conversation ends with emotional devastation on both sides, signaling a fracture that may not easily heal before the looming battle ahead. In chapter 106, Melusine and Cosette share an intimate moment, but Melusine remains mentally preoccupied with their recent failure at the barn, specifically how a mortal slipped through their grasp, enraging Tigan. Cosette, sensing Melusine's distraction, brings up her guilt over Prince Kael's death, fearing Tigan still suspects her. Melusine reassures her that Kael's unescorted travel and Elphame's gossip were more likely to blame, though Cosette had been the last to see him. Their conversation shifts when Melusine suggests that Cosette's river-dwelling family might be useful now, particularly with Kyrus's return. Cosette hesitates, claiming she no longer shares secrets with them, but Melusine urges her to reconsider. Despite her fears of vulnerability and loss, Melusine still deeply loves Cosette and pulls her back into bed, hinting that Cosette's family could play a strategic role going forward. Their relationship, both emotionally and politically, may hold keys to unraveling current threats. In chapter 107, Eris is buried in administrative work when Ivy informs him that a recruit wishes to speak with him about the Butcher of Kelwith. Initially reluctant, Eris changes his mind upon hearing the name and agrees to meet. The recruit turns out to be Rose, who reveals sensitive information about Kyrus's possible whereabouts. She explains that she came forward because of the emotional toll Kyrus has taken on Bristol, his manipulation, abandonment, and betrayal, and her fear that he may cause further harm, especially with the choosing ceremony approaching. Rose is uncertain if betraying Bristol's confidence was the right move, but Eris assures her it was necessary. He acknowledges that while this may damage their friendship, the intelligence could finally offer Tigan the closure he desperately needs. Eris promises to keep the information private and walks Rose to the door, quietly determined to act on what she shared. In chapter 108, Bristol, still emotionally wrecked from her outburst and fight with Tigan, seeks comfort late at night by visiting Julia. She collapses into her arms, overwhelmed by pain and despair, unable to cry until she's safely inside. Julia comforts her, examines her injured thumb, and treats it with wine, balm, and quiet conversation. As Julia heals her hand, Bristol admits she's lost all sense of direction. She regrets coming to Elphame, feels betrayed by Tegan, her father, and the council, and doesn't know whom to trust after learning painful truths about her past. Julia encourages her to see truth for what it is, complicated, often laced with regret, and speaks of her own difficult past, shaped by choices made as both a lioness and a human. She tells Bristol that forgiveness isn't dictated by others, but by the heart. Though Julia can mend bones, she reminds Bristol there's no magic for a broken heart. In chapter 109, Bristol pushes through emotional exhaustion to attend morning drills, where Olivia, Esme, and Reuben bombard the recruits with relentless magical commands. Initially overwhelmed, the group eventually operates in seamless unison, impressing even their harsh instructors. Afterward, Casta briefs the recruits on a rescue mission for Kael. Bristol is unexpectedly excluded, and Casta's harsh reaction raises suspicions. Tigan's absence from both drills and council meetings intensifies Bristol's unease. Determined to find him, she discovers his quarters filled with signs of secret activity. Upon barging in, she finds Quinn, Melusine, Eris, Chastain, and a disoriented injured Tigan, shirtless and bandaged. Quinn explains Tigan inhaled demon-infested smoke from her brush ashes, fearing she was in danger. Though Bristol tries to reject blame, the depth of Tigan's sacrifice unsettles her. As she walks away, guilt and concern overwhelm her. In defiance, she marches back to his quarters, steeling herself to confront him again, unwilling to leave things unresolved. In chapter 110, Bristol fights to remain in Tigan's quarters, arguing with the High Witch and appealing to Eris and Melusine for support. Despite Tigan's demands for her to leave, Melusine allows her to stay after Bristol admits she still loves him. The counselor warns Bristol that Tigan needs at least 6 hours of real sleep to recover from the demonic possession. Inside, Bristol finds Tigan chained and broken, his mind still tormented. When he lashes out violently in a half-sleep, nearly choking her, her voice and declaration of love break through, calming him. She soothes him by singing an old poem through the night. Outside, the others listen anxiously. After hours of singing, Tigan finally sleeps. When he wakes, they share a quiet, intimate moment and reconnect both emotionally and physically. Their reunion, while tender, is also raw with vulnerability and healing. Outside, the others hear a scream but realize it's not one of pain.